Puck around and find out.
So last week's news was dominated by a lot of issues, from the tragic death of former Pittsburgh Penguin Adam Johnson to the historic ineptitude of the San Jose Sharks, the continued freefall of the Edmonton Oilers, and a new allegation coming out against the Chicago Blackhawks related to the Kyle Beach sexual assault claims. But those all pale in comparison to what's been going on in Ottawa, so I wanted to take a minute to kind of go through what I think is the series of events and just who's in the right and who's in the wrong. And spoiler alert, the NHL is once again shooting itself in the foot by being a collection of dumbasses. So Andlauer is a Canadian businessman. He is the head of the Andlauer Healthcare Group, and as of 6 weeks ago, he is officially the majority owner of the Ottawa Senators. Now, crucially, this is not Andlauer's first time as owner of a major hockey organization. He was a part owner of the Hamilton Bulldogs, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens back in the early 2000s, and he also eventually became part owner of the Montreal Canadiens back in 2009. So he's no greenhorn when it comes to NHL circles, all the executives and ownership entities that he would have to interact with. He's not somebody coming into the NHL's ownership sphere with just no background or connections. He knows a lot of people. He's been involved with the NHL and AHL in some capacity for 2 decades now. But last week, he came out very forcefully admonishing the NHL for what he perceives to be bad faith in negotiations around his purchase of the Ottawa Senators, specifically with regards to 2 incidents that came to light in the last week. Number one, of course, being the Shane Pinto suspension, which I talked about in another video. It reeked of shadiness that the NHL was getting contacts from a gambling partner about activity on a player's account that's not related to him gambling on hockey. Pinto got suspended for half of the season after an investigation that had, by all accounts, been going on for some lengthy amount of time. According to a report in The Athletic by Chris Johnson, the investigation was going on over the summer, so during the time that Andlauer was in final stages of negotiation to buy the Senators. And from Andlauer's comments last week, it makes it seem as though he was not aware of this potential suspension. He said, quote, "It's about the timing. When this happened, that this young man was under investigation, the organization should have been made aware," which to me is a pretty thinly veiled shot at the NHL saying, hey, I was in the final stages of acquiring this team, and the team did not know or did not inform me that this investigation was going on. In all likelihood, this doesn't affect materially the purchase and sale of the Senators, but there are disclosures that are required when you're purchasing an asset such as the Ottawa Senators, and there should be disclosures about anything relevant to the deal. And having a young, budding player getting suspended potentially for half the year is something that he should have at least been aware of, or that the organization at least should have been aware of and able to disclose to him. Of course, the NHL might assert that this was an ongoing investigation, so they couldn't in good faith disclose the status to either him or to the Senators until the investigation was concluded. But in all honesty, they should have been able to at least inform the organization that an investigation was ongoing, even if they couldn't give them the details or give them any pertinent information. But this decision honestly pales in comparison to the other incident, which Andlauer has every right to be incensed about, which is the NHL docking the Ottawa Senators organization a first-round pick for the botched Evgeny Dadonov trade. When Dadonov signed his agreement with the Ottawa Senators, he had a limited no-trade clause, which allowed him to put a list of 10 teams that he could refuse a trade to. Since then, Ottawa traded him to Vegas, who then at the deadline tried to flip him for assets to Anaheim, but Anaheim was on that list of 10 teams that he had submitted that he could block a trade to. Ottawa hadn't informed Vegas or Anaheim of that when that trade was going through, so Dadonov had the ability to block the trade, and so both Anaheim and Vegas complained to the NHL, feeling like their ability to negotiate in good faith had been compromised by Ottawa not giving this information to Vegas when they dealt him originally. Now, all of this was done obviously under the former regime, which was run by former GM Pierre Dorian, who was relieved of his duties in part because of his handling of the Dadonov situation. But the important thing is that the Nexus trade, the one between Vegas and Anaheim that set off this chain of events happened in March 2022, so over a year and a half ago, and they were just docked the first-round pick within the next 3 years this last week. So it took over a year and a half for the NHL to come down with this punishment, and they came down with it right after Andlauer purchased the team. And I think Andlauer has every right to be upset about the fact that a transaction that happened well before he was owner of the team, probably even in the early stages of him trying to purchase the team, is now coming down and impacting his organization's ability to build their team in the future. Dorion was also accused of putting the Ottawa Senators into salary cap hell, in a sense, by not re-signing Pinto and putting on these big contracts that kind of gives them less cap flexibility, and ultimately that's a big part of the reason why Andlauer fired him. But to me, that time gap is really where Andlauer has the right to be upset. The fact that they couldn't get a punishment sorted out even by the 2023 draft, before Andlauer had purchased the team, docking them maybe a second or a third last year, so that he going in would have the full confidence and knowledge that this decision was already behind them, that the punishment had already been meted out. It really just goes to show not only what a crap show the Ottawa Senators were under Eugene Melnyk and Pierre Dorion, but also how big a crap show the NHL is when it comes to meting out punishments. Like, according to Andlauer, when he was told of the possibility of the Ottawa Senators facing punishment because of the Dodonov trade, he was told that it was, quote, a non-issue, unquote, when it comes to the severity of the penalty that would be handed down. And obviously losing a first-round pick is not a non-issue when it comes to the severity of a potential punishment. And to not have this properly disclosed to him during his due diligence when he is completing the purchase of his team, that's a big deal. And yeah, it probably doesn't affect the purchase price of the organization that much, like if at all. But the fact that the NHL is not giving this to the potential owner of the organization during the purchase of the team is ridiculous, especially given the fact that, again, because this happened so long ago in the past, it's not like there was something new that came up during the course of the investigation at the last minute that suddenly knocked the severity of the punishment up a notch. The NHL knew probably when Andlauer was purchasing the team about how severe of punishment they were going to deal out. They should have been upfront with him and straight with him and said, look, it'll probably be more than a slap on the wrist. We'll give you some options, maybe something in the realm of losing a high draft pick. And would that have caused Andlauer to drop out and not purchase the Senators? Probably not. But at least then he would go in clear knowledge and he'd be able to fight it with the NHL down the line. As it is now, he seems a bit blindsided, not just by this, but also the Pinto issue. So now he is rightfully taking a shot at the NHL, Gary Bettman, and the other owners for not dealing in good faith. And let's also not forget that this is all on the backdrop of an entity, the NHL, that has historically been awful when it comes to ownership transitions, whether it's the multitude of people who have tried to buy the Arizona Coyotes over the years and all of those deals that have fallen through, the nightmare era of ownership of Warren Crowell's and Len Barry of the Tampa Bay Lightning, the fact that John Spano was almost able to buy the New York Islanders despite having no money. This is just not a one-off. The NHL has been horrible in how it's dealt with prospective owners, its vetting and disclosure processes, and honestly, a lot of that has to fall on Gary Bettman's shoulders. I know that he's an unpopular guy amongst NHL fans, but I am honestly surprised that NHL owners have kept him around for so long given his history of incompetence in dealing with purchasers and sales of NHL teams. Yuri Slafkovsky is off to a less than impressive start to the 2023-24 NHL season. He has 1 point in 9 games with the Montreal Canadiens, which prompted the analytics duo of Andy and Rono to say, yikes, 1.9 games. This is really not an ideal start for Yuri Slafkovsky into the season. We are really concerned that this could be the worst number 1 draft pick since Nail Yakupov, to be honest. And the mention of Yakupov, who is widely regarded as one of the biggest busts, not just of the modern NHL, but of all time, is obviously going to send chills down the spines of every Montreal Canadiens fan. I'm here to let you Habs fans know that the comparisons between Slafkovsky and Yakupov are entirely unfair, because Slafkovsky is most certainly worse than Yakupov was at this point in their careers. As of right now, Slafkovsky has played in 48 NHL games and recorded 11 points. He has 4 goals and 7 assists in his career. He just turned 19 in March, the same age that Yakupov was in his rookie season, when he, Yakupov, also played in 48 games. Over the same number of games that Slafkovsky has played throughout his 2 NHL seasons, now Yakupov recorded 17 goals and 31 points. In the same number of games, Yakupov had more goals than Slafkovsky has points, at the exact same age. The counter to this from Montreal fans would be that Yakupov peaked in his rookie year. He never really got any better, and that is true. His 31 points in 48 games was the best production on a point-per-game basis of his career. However, through the remainder of his short NHL career, Yakupov posted a higher points per game than Slafkovsky has put up so far in 4 of his 5 remaining seasons. That 5th season was 2016-2017 when he put up 9 points in 40 games as a member of the St. Louis Blues. And that points per game over an 82-game season would have been the difference of about half a point. That is the level we're talking about for Slafkovsky, a less productive player than Nail Yakupov ever was. And yes, Yakupov had all the issues off the ice that Slafkovsky does not seem to have, which is great. And it certainly gives him a better opportunity to overcome that lack of production early. But we also have to call a spade a spade. The lack of production for Slafkovsky so far is at a level that we have not seen. And I've seen some people mention Jack Hughes and his slow start as another comparable. But again, Hughes' lowest points per game mark in his rookie year is still miles above that of Slafkovsky. And I went back through all the former #1 overall picks, going back all the way to 2000, and I couldn't find any that had a point per game mark as low as Slafkovsky to start their careers. And I've seen a lot of suggestions from Habs fans that, well, Slafkovsky just needs a little more time to develop. He needs to maybe go play in the AHL to hone his game, and while I do agree that going to the AHL can be very good for players who maybe lack confidence, maybe haven't adapted to the North American game, or just haven't put it together mentally but have a lot of physical tools, maybe raw players who need to be developed, that's not the level that you should be expecting from a #1 overall pick. Because believe it or not, the last time a #1 overall pick spent time in the AHL was Ryan Nugent-Hopkins back in 2012-2013, because there was a labor stoppage, and so he and other first overall pick Taylor Hall went and played for the Oklahoma City Barons in the AHL until that stoppage was resolved. Before that work stoppage, the last time a first overall pick spent any time in the AHL was Marc-Andre Fleury, the goaltender for the Pittsburgh Penguins, back before he became the full-time starter. And you have to acknowledge that things are just very different for goaltenders. Like, it's not surprising that a guy like Fleury, even a #1 overall pick, couldn't step into the NHL immediately. Frankly, goalies are kind of an enigma. They develop at their own pace. But do you want to know the last time that a skater, who was a #1 overall pick, went down and played in the AHL, not because of a work stoppage? It was the first overall pick from the 1993 NHL draft, Alexander Daigle, widely regarded as the biggest bust in NHL draft history. And he even got a full 8 years bouncing around the NHL before he was finally relegated to the AHL. So the fact that we're talking about Slafkovsky going down to the AHL before his first year worth of games is even done is pretty shocking. And look, I'm not trying to put this on Slafkovsky because he seems like a good kid. He keeps his nose clean. He plays, a little bit of a style of game that maybe could take a bit more time to develop. So I don't put the blame on him more than I put the blame on the Montreal Canadiens for taking this kid. And their only saving grace is that we're not so far removed from that draft that not many players have gotten to play in the NHL full time. So we can't really look at this pick and say, like, here are the guys that they could have taken, but they passed up on. Although Logan Cooley is already looking like he could be a very good player, we don't really know how good Logan Cooley could be. But with the way that Slafkovsky is starting his career, he might not even develop into a middle six winger. He might not reach the levels of like a 40-point guy. I hate to be so pessimistic because, again, he seems like a good kid. And it is definitely so early in his career that I hate to throw the B word around, but we kind of have to be honest with what we've seen so far. It's been more than half a season's worth of games, and we have not seen any signs that Juraj Slafkovsky is not going to end up as a bust. Alright, now it's time for NHL Week 4 Pyramid of Power, where I go through the different tiers of each NHL team. And I'm going to add a little wrinkle to this at the end. I'm also going to give my 3 teams on Broad Watch for the season teams that I think have underperformed, or teams that are performing well, but there are underlying reasons why I think they're going to be proven to be fraudulent. But let's start with the Pyramid of Power, and the number one team is, no surprise, the Colorado Avalanche. Even though they're only 5th in terms of point percentage, 16 points in 11 games, to me this is still one of the best teams in the entire NHL. Their underlying analytics are great. They completely boat race the Sharks. I mean, this is just one of the most complete teams in the entire league. Now in Tier 2, we have the Boston Bruins, who are not a surprise, but we also have the Carolina Hurricanes. Even though the Hurricanes are only 8-5, 16 points in 13 games, a big reason for their downfall so far is just purely goaltending. Freddie Anderson has not been good this year. Now he is hurt. They're going to get to beat up on some teams that are a little bit on the weaker side, like the Lightnings and Flyers, along with beatable teams like the Penguins and the Panthers. I'm still not willing to write off a team that made the Eastern Conference Finals last year just because they've had a slightly above average start to their season. I still think that they are an elite team once they get some good goaltending. Tier 3 is going to be some controversy because we have the Dallas Stars and the New York Rangers, who I think most people would agree are in that top tier. But then we also have the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Edmonton Oilers, two teams who are at the bottom of the standing. And the reason that I have these two teams so high up is because their underlying analytics are just so strong, yet they cannot win. The Penguins and the Oilers are 2nd and 3rd in the NHL in expected goal differential. They're 1st and 2nd in expected goals for, and both are top 10 in expected goals against. Now, what is the big problem? For the Oilers, I've mentioned it before, it's very simple, they have no goaltending. For the Penguins, it's really that they have no depth scoring, which was everybody's concern coming into this year. And the Oilers are making a move to try and bring up Calvin Pickard, who can potentially be better than the dumpster fire that was Stuart Skinner and Jack Campbell. The Penguins, it's a little tougher. You just kind of need to see more out of that bottom 6. But I'm still not willing to give up on both of these teams, considering their strong underlying analytics and kind of how easy those problems are to flip. Down in Tier 3, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs, Winnipeg Jets, LA Kings, New Jersey Devils, Vancouver Canucks, and Vegas Golden Knights. The Canucks and Golden Knights are going to be controversial to be this far down because they're two of the best teams in the NHL in terms of points. But again, underlying analytics suggest that these two are getting more lucky than good in terms of how they're pulling out wins. These two have the highest goal differential above expected of any team in the NHL. Vancouver's in particular is almost twice that of Vegas's, and Vegas's is 5 more than the next highest team. So this isn't a matter of just they're getting some timely goaltending and they're getting some better shooting. Like, this is unsustainable, and I think both of these teams are eventually just going to run into a wall when they play some stiffer competition. The Toronto Maple Leafs are also in this tier, and incredibly, they were my number 1 team going into this year. They have fallen off completely, but the Leafs are right in the middle of the standings. They're 14th overall in points, with 14 points in 12 games, and their expected goal differential is actually quite low. It's negative 4.09. That's bottom 6 in the entire NHL. So the Leafs have a lot of stuff that they got to clean up, because the analytics say that the Leafs might even be worse than the standings show. And then the LA Kings making the big jump. I had my doubts about the Kings going into this year, particularly in net, but they have assuaged all of those concerns. Their expected goals against is number 1 in the NHL, 18.23. And even though goaltending is a problem, they're giving up 3.77 more goals than expected because their goaltenders are still, quite frankly, not that good. Their team defense has been outstanding. The LA Kings are a much better defensive team than I gave them credit for coming into this year. And I gotta eat my words, they are definitely an ascending team. In Tier 5, we have a glut of teams that are going to be competing for the final playoff spots. Ottawa, Buffalo, the Red Wings, Islanders, Flames, Predators, Caps, Wild, and Panthers. The one to point out here is the Ottawa Senators, who dropped dramatically from last week. They now have 8 points in 10 games. That is the 4th worst in the NHL. They're bottom 5 in expected goal differential, simply because they can't score. They're dead last in terms of expected goals for, which on a team with guys like Stützle, Tkachuk, Tarasenko, Giroux, Sanderson, Chychrun, after the hot start that they got into, they have completely evaporated in terms of their goal scoring. And I know Senators fans will say, well, we've been scoring over the last few games. Yeah, but look at the teams that you've been playing and the goalies you've been playing. The Lightning with Jonas Johansson, who you gave up 6 goals against. The LA Kings, whose goaltending is still terrible. They held you to 2 goals. The Pittsburgh Penguins, who you got Tristan Jarry yanked after 3 goals on 9 shots. The Islanders' stout goaltending held you to 2 goals, and then you put up 4 goals against the Sabres, but again, you gave up 6 goals. Like, Ottawa fans were chanting fire DJ Smith, and honestly, I am not opposed to that notion. He is not a very good coach. He has not proven to be a very good coach. And this Ottawa team is very talented, and they are letting an opportunity slip away because they just cannot finish chances, and they cannot put away teams with bad goaltending. Not to say that they don't have bad goaltending themselves, but their goalies are keeping up their end of the bargain. And then finally, in the last tier, it's the usual suspects with just the St. Louis Blues joining this ragtag group. The 2 teams I could see a lot of people pushing back on are the Ducks and the Lightning being down here, considering they both have winning records. The Ducks have been one of the hottest teams in the NHL. But again, let's look at the underlying analytics. The Ducks and the Lightning are bottom 10 in expected goal differential. The Ducks are getting some absolutely ridiculous goaltending from John Gibson and Lucas Dostal, while the Lightning are just able to score in droves above their expected rate. Kind of like I said earlier with the Red Wings, I think at a certain point these 2 teams are just going to cool off, and the analytics suggest that they're going to be back down in the doldrums of the basement. So I'm going to do something a little bit different in conjunction with my Pyramid of Power. This is a new segment called Fraud Watch, where each week I'm going to put 3 teams that I think are getting an inordinate amount of praise or backing for their performance. I already kind of did this once when I said that the Detroit Red Wings would cool off after their absurdly hot start, which they did. So I am now going to give my 3 teams that I put on Fraud Watch. So in the future, when these teams drop down, I can say I told you so, and if they don't and they continue going on heaters, well, I can look like an idiot. So the first team and the biggest fraud I have so far is the Vancouver Canucks. They are tied for the 3rd best point percentage in the NHL with New York at 9 wins, 2 losses, and 1 OT shootout loss. They have a goal differential of +30. They're 7-2-1 over their past 10 games. And in all honesty, the Vancouver Canucks are a good team. Just because they're on the Fraud Watch doesn't mean they're not good. But I don't think they're a top 5 team in the NHL. I think they're very solidly a playoff team. But the underlying analytics do not support the idea that the Vancouver Canucks are going to maintain this pace and be in competition for the top spot in the West. Now, why are they frauds? Well, number one, their 5-on-5 analytics are pretty bad. They are actually 4th worst in expected goal differential at 5-on-5 this year. Now, in all situations, they're very good. They're right in the middle at 14th overall. The difference is, of course, their power play. They have the 4th best power play in the league at 32.6% efficiency. In a small sample size, that is obviously going to have to go down. There's no way that they can maintain scoring on almost a third of their power plays. And again, to be clear, I am not putting the Canucks on the fraud list because I think they're a bad team or they're not going to make the playoffs or they're going to lose like 7 of their next 10 games. But what I am saying is I don't think that they're the 2nd best team in the West and a top 5 team in the NHL. I think that they will make the playoffs right now because of their hot start. I think they'll make it quite comfortably, but they're not going to maintain this level of play. The next team that I have on my fraud watch is the winners of 6 straight before their loss last night, the Anaheim Ducks. Currently sitting at a 7-5 record with 14 points in 12 games. The Ducks rattled off 6 straight wins, including some impressive victories over teams like the Golden Knights, Penguins, Flyers, and Bruins. And as a result, they've gotten over their terrible start to be right back in the thick of the standings. However, in that 6-game winning streak, it's important to remember that 3 of those games were wins by 1 goal, 2 of the games were 2-goal wins, and the other one was their only impressive win, a 3-goal victory over the Philadelphia Flyers. During that time, the Ducks did not give up more than 4 goals in any single game, and that's the big reason why they were so successful. They've gotten incredible play from both of their goaltenders, John Gibson and Lucas Dostal, who have put up save percentages of .921 and .920 so far this season. But the team itself is pretty dismal. It has the 5th worst expected goal differential of -6.44, and that's mainly because of their goaltenders playing outside of their mind. They're taking the 5th fewest shots per game, while also being bottom 10 in shots against per game. Kind of like the Canucks, they're getting bailed out by really good goaltending on their end, but on the other hand, they're winning a lot of these coin flip games by 1 or 2 goals. And also, let's not forget that outside of those 6 games that they won, the Anaheim Ducks have a record of 1-4. Maybe they are just a streaky team, or maybe this win streak was an aberration, but right now, I'm not putting them as, oh, the Ducks are the likely team to make the playoffs. I still think they will miss it, especially if and when their goaltending regresses to the mean. And then finally, my last team on Fraud Watch for the week is No, I'm gonna get hate for this, but it's the Vegas Golden Knights. I know that they're the defending Stanley Cup champions and that they're the #1 team in the NHL right now, but not only is this pace, the gaudy pace that they're on, unsustainable, but honestly, their whole style of play this year is just not sustainable. You want to know a stat that's absolutely going to shock you? The Vegas Golden Knights are 9th worst in the NHL in shots for per game at 29%. They actually have a slightly negative shot differential per game this year. And as a result, they also have a negative expected goal differential on the year, just slightly, which doesn't align with the fact that they have a plus 24 goal differential this year, second highest behind only the Canucks in the NHL. They're 8-1-1 over their last 10 games. Vegas is a really good team. I want to emphasize that. But they are not this good. They're not even close to being this good. And I think most people would agree that Vegas isn't going to lose all of like 8 to 10 games over the course of the season. But even to that extent, this is really unsustainable. I had Vegas picked as the second team coming out of the Pacific Division behind the Edmonton Oilers, and with the Oilers floundering, although they are getting some horrible goaltending, and I think that they will turn things around, because of the hot start, I do think that Vegas is now going to end up winning the division. But I don't think they're going to win it as handily as they might be projected to do right now.